Welcome, everyone. We're very pleased that you've joined us for the last of our 2016 Sharing Ocean Acidification Resources for Communicators and Educators webinar. And SOURCE is presented by NOAA National Marine Sanctuaries and the Ocean Acidification Program in partnership with Washington Sea Grant and the Institute for Systems Biology. Our goal is to provide ocean acidification communication tools to formal and informal educators and stakeholders across the country to promote a more integrated and effective ocean acidification education community. We had more than 185 registrants for today's webinar from New York, Oregon, Ohio, Tennessee, California, and Guam, among many other places. So thanks so much for joining us. I'm Laura Francis, Education Coordinator at the Channel Islands National Marine Sanctuary. And let's get my slide up here. And we also have Jen Bennett-Mintz from NOAA Ocean Acidification Program on the webinar. She'll be behind the scenes today helping answer questions from attendees. And during the presentation, attendees will be in listen-only mode. You're welcome to type questions related to technical issues or questions for the presenter in the question box at the bottom of the control panel on the right side of your screen. We'll be monitoring incoming questions and we'll respond to them or pose them to our speaker at the end of the presentation. Also, we always welcome your input on what SOURCE webinar speakers you'd like to see or what topics or resources you would like to see covered in upcoming webinars. If you have some ideas for us, please type into the question box and we'll take those into consideration as we're planning for the future. Also, we're recording this session and we'll share the recording with all the registered participants via Google Drive sometime next week. That will come out and you'll get an email notice about that. So the title of today's presentation is Visualizing Change, New Tools for Educators, and we're very excited to have John Anderson as our presenter today. John is Director of Education at the New England Aquarium. I'll go ahead and bring up the slide. There we go. And he leads efforts to develop programs that foster an ethic of ocean stewardship for audiences from school students to families and teachers. He's helped to lead several climate change education projects, including the National Network for Ocean and Climate Change Interpretation and the Visualizing Change project. He's interested in continuing to learn from theoretical research and from assessment of educational practices about how to effectively engage audiences from all walks of life and seeing themselves as empowered agents of change. So John's going to share some great new products developed by the Visualizing Change project, which is a partnership of 6 informal science education institutions along with social scientists to create a toolkit for informal educators, usually using visual narratives on climate change and ocean acidification. And this project was supported by a NOAA Environmental Literacy Grant. So John, I'm going to go ahead and pass the torch over to you, and we can get started.
So thank you. I need to share my screen? No, it's already shared. Or is it?
You need to share your screen.
All right, I got to just find the right button. Hold on. I'm sorry. Sharing. I did this the other day.
There should be a little pop-up somewhere that there you go.
Did that work? Are you seeing the slide? Or
Yes.
Are you seeing all the notes?
We've just got the slide.
Okay. Well, hello everyone. Thank you so much for taking time to join in this webinar, particularly at the end of the year and the season of short Northern Hemisphere days and many holidays that add to our busy lives. I always think as an educator that it's good to ask your audience to think about their own starting point. So before I get started, I would ask each of you to make a note either in the chat box or on a piece of paper or some other way. Make a note about why you decided to take time to join this webinar today. I think this is important. I'm going to ask you at the end of the webinar to reflect back and think about whether you got something out of it related to what you hoped for. So take a moment and make a note to yourself or chat in the chat box. Why did you join in this webinar? All right, some of you may take longer, but Laura, thank you. Thanks to you and Jen for inviting me. Again, my name is John Anderson, and I work in Boston, Massachusetts at New England Aquarium. And I hope that what I'll be sharing today will be useful for you as you do your work. And I have two pop-up questions that we're going to put up. One is, do you already present about ocean acidification, or do you plan to in the future? And I think we can pop that question up.
All right, we'll leave that up for another 10 seconds or so. So if you haven't answered, please go ahead and do that. All right, last call. Okay, John, I'm sharing the poll results. Can you see those, or do you want me to read them to you?
I can't see those, so maybe read them briefly.
All right. Yeah, so we've got 44% already present about OA or plan to in the future, 41% 44% already do, 41% plan to in the future, and 16% have no plans for this yet.
Thanks. And then the next question is related. Where do you present, or where might you present about ocean acidification? What kind of context would be possible for you to share information about ocean acidification? So that poll is open, I think.
All right, another 10 seconds or so, and I'll close it. Okay, John, we've got 38% aquarium, zoo, or nature center, 17% science museum, 41% K through 12 school, 30% college or university, and 44% other.
I'm sorry, can you go back to this K-12 school? I'm just taking a note down. 17% science museums?
41%.
41%.
K-12 school, 30% college, and 44% other.
Oh, a lot of other. Okay. All right. So, so I hope that for those that are already presenting about ocean acidification, that there will be some ideas here that either are new and useful or reinforce things that you have been learning about already. And if you are thinking about or plan to present about ocean acidification, I hope these tools will help you to get started. So I'll give a brief overview of the background of the Visualizing Change project, what our goals are, and then I'll share a sample video and I'll walk through an online toolkit that you can access yourself at vischange.org. So I'll go through it fairly quickly and you can delve into it much more deeply later, but I'll orient you. And I want to call attention to the fact that this is a really brief introduction, and we are offering a two-part training by web in January, and there's a link there, and there's another link I'll show you that's on the vischange.org website. So if you are intrigued and want to delve in more deeply, there are other ways beyond today to do that. The toolkit that we've developed has a couple different major functions. One is to provide education for educators and communicators. It's to help you learn about some fundamental theory and approaches. And secondly, it's directly a set of materials. We have presentation materials that you can download and you can use them either on a flat screen display or you can use them on a spherical display like a Science on a Sphere or a Magic Planet or iGlobe. So they're flexible materials for different kinds of presentation platforms. The Visualizing Change project is a project funded by NOAA. with goals to build capacity in the informal science learning field. So I want to call out that many of you are not in the museum field. You're educators in other realms, and you may detect that I have a kind of a bent towards the museum world, and so you may have to do a little bit of translating to your particular situation. And I encourage and invite you, I welcome you, and I encourage and invite you to raise questions, chat your questions in, and I'll do the best I can to address those later on. So the goals include building capacity among informal science educators and institutions to use social and cognitive research to guide how we share global data. And we want to do this in ways that engage and welcome audiences and orient towards a sense of empowerment. That's significant in my mind, that we want people to feel empowered as they engage in looking at data, learning about data, even data at a global scale. And we want to foster conversations about solutions so that as the world changes and as scientists are measuring and monitoring changes at broad scales, it's important for society to have productive conversations about what can we do to manage those changes that will affect all of us and will affect the natural systems that are connected to human social systems. So with these tools and trainings, we expect that informal science education institutions, and I hope also those of you in school settings, college settings, I hope they'll help us to be collectively better equipped to help audiences understand global systems and how they are linked to our daily lives. They're not just some distant out there kind of phenomena, but they're really about where we live. The Visualizing Change project is a collaborative. All the institutions that were involved are the core drivers are indicated on the slide. And together we developed 4 visual narratives. That's what we call our products. One focuses on the connection between climate change and oceans, or the ocean. Another is about extreme weather. Another is about sea level rise. And one is about ocean acidification, and that's what we're focusing on today. We did develop them using recommendations from cognitive and social sciences, so I'm going to go through a little bit of that. And most of us who are on the core leadership team for this project built on previous work informed by the National Network for Ocean and Climate Change Interpretation. I'm just curious, and we'll do another quick poll to ask how familiar are you with the National Network for Ocean and Climate Change Interpretation, or the acronym NOAA. So can we pop up that poll?
Another 10 seconds. All right, John, we've got 40% have never heard of NOAA, and 25% don't know much about it, 18% can describe it generally, 11% know a lot about it, and 7% have been deeply involved.
Great, thank you. So, okay, so for those of you that have been deeply involved or know a lot about it, I'm going to review some information that will be very familiar, and for the rest of you, I hope this is new information that you'll find useful. So, first of all, why would we do the Visualizing Change project at all? And there is a tremendous amount of data being captured, being studied, synthesized by NOAA, by NASA, and many other organizations. And making sense of that is challenging, and particularly if we want to make use of the data with public audiences. And at the same time, over the last decade, lots of technology has been emerging to share that data, both platforms and software. Things like Google Earth, things like Science on a Sphere that NOAA began investing in more than a decade ago, have made it easier to share or show data. And a few years ago, looking particularly at the Science on a Sphere program, NOAA asked, are people getting much out of it? And evaluations showed that people found it fascinating, found it very attractive. Science on a Sphere looks good, it's intriguing, and people even said, yeah, I learned something. And when asked what did they learn, the answers were quite shallow. So our team took that as a challenge. We said, can we use social sciences to guide us in helping to share data in ways that go a little deeper, that people can make more meaning of and get a little more sticky. In addition, studies were showing that our audiences appeared to be primed. There's particularly among zoo, aquarium, national park audiences, there's a great deal of interest in climate change issues, and there's evidence that our audiences look to our centers for information about what can we do about it. So given the interest and the importance of global scale issues and data available, I think we have a responsibility to find ways to facilitate learning that does help people understand how all of us can be involved in making a positive difference. So before I move on, another question, and this is a little bit reflective of the question about the Gnocchi project. How familiar are you with the concept of an explanatory chain? Explanatory chain. So we got another pop-up question here.
All right, 5 more seconds. So John, we've got 39% have never heard of it, 39% have a guess about it, 7% have read about them, 4% practice using them, and 11% teach others to use them.
Okay, teachers, you can give me feedback later. See if I can summarize this accurately. So this thing called strategic framing. This is a name of a theory that includes recommendations grounded in social and cognitive sciences, and working together, these tools or these components allow us to navigate through conversations and communications towards solutions and actions at a scale of positive impact. Our research partners at Frameworks Institute and New Knowledge Organization have identified a number of positive outcomes when we use strategic framing communication approaches. A well-framed message can change public discourse about some of the most challenging issues of our time. So that's very promising. Many challenging issues have public discourse that is argumentative, that is sort of sound bites, he said, she said style of communication, and that is not particularly inviting for most audiences. If we can change the nature of that conversation to be more inviting and welcoming, we think it can make a difference. So that's what we're trying to do. So more specifically, these effective ways to communicate about complex topics and to invite considerations of commonality rather than differences and possibilities rather than despair. Again, I'm thinking of climate change as a broad placeholder here. If we're having conversations that lead to despair, we'd like to change those to conversations that lead to an idea of possibilities. So these different sets or elements of strategic framing include the ones listed here. Values help us to address why we should care. Some values are more likely to be effective than others. Frameworks Institute research led to recommendations to use two values in particular. One is protection, and the other is responsible management. Protection is about all of us wanting to help care for and protect people and places from being harmed. Responsible management is about our core belief that we should take practical common sense steps to address problems before they get worse and before they do harm to future generations. So values have a role to play to orient to why this conversation or why this topic or why this story, as it were, is worth our attention. A reasonable tone is about a neutral tone of voice and vocabulary that emphasizes the issue at hand is, it's a matter of fact, it's what is. It conveys a sense of importance and urgency and carefully avoids an alarm or a crisis-oriented tone. And this is important, and we're going to unpack these as we go through examples later. Carefully tested metaphors are used as one component of explanatory chains. Explanatory chains are simple descriptions of the mechanism that drives an issue from a root cause to a problem. And when a metaphor works well, it will help people to understand the fundamental mechanism and the connections from the root cause to a problem or a challenge. And when they're working really well, a well-chosen metaphor will help make abstract ideas both more concrete and also easier to remember, or some people say stickier. And community-level solutions identify what we can do rather than what I or what you as an individual can do. They hold forward the idea that together we can connect with regional effects and collective civic actions, and by providing community-level solutions, we can begin to match the scale of the problem or the challenge at hand. So what I'd like to do is, what I've just said has been a very rapid overview of core recommendations coming out of social and cognitive sciences. Again, some of you are unfamiliar with those, or maybe unfamiliar with the language I've been using. So we'll get into some examples and the toolkit that can help you get more deeply oriented. But visual narratives were built with those recommendations and make use of them. We also tried hard to follow recommendations from people who study how visuals connect with audiences' minds or brains, and tried to choose visuals very carefully along the way. So there's another set of recommendations we endeavored to make use of. So I'm going to play a video. Our colleague Katie Hart narrated this video. She's an educator at Seattle Aquarium. She's a terrific colleague, and I appreciate that she did this piece. And so let me see if I can pull this up. I'm starting it in a little bit past her introduction. I'll show a couple minutes of it and then come back and unpack it. Please shout out if the sound is not clear.
Now you might be thinking, wait a minute, what do solar panels have to do with the health of the ocean? Well, scientists have discovered that burning fossil fuels for energy, like coal, oil, and natural gas, causes a serious problem called ocean acidification. So has anybody heard of ocean acidification? It might be new for many of us, but now that we know about this problem as concerned citizens, we have a responsibility to be a part of the solution for the future generations and the health of the ocean. Now, this next image shows many ways in which this fossil fuel energy system has helped to connect people around the world. So you can see the green, blue, and red lines, which represent land, sea, and air transportation routes around our planet. Burning fossil fuels has helped us move around our planet, power the places that we live and work, and create global connections that support our modern lifestyle. So there's no doubt that this energy system has done a lot of good, but it's also created rampant carbon dioxide accumulation in our atmosphere. Now, what does that mean, rampant carbon dioxide? Well, some carbon dioxide, or CO2, is needed for life processes. But it's not just something that plants breathe in and we breathe out. It's also something that gets put into our atmosphere anytime we burn fossil fuels. And these activities are putting a lot of CO2 into the atmosphere. You can see that in the image on the screen behind me as the cloud forms around the Earth. That cloud represents the accumulation of carbon dioxide in our atmosphere. Now, carbon dioxide is actually invisible, so this video is just a way of representing what we otherwise would not be able to see. Now, let's look at another video. This one shows that not all of that carbon dioxide stays in the air. Some of it is absorbed by the ocean. We can see that happening in this video. And as that excess carbon dioxide, which we can see here in the atmosphere, is then absorbed into the ocean, it reacts with seawater, changing the ocean's chemistry. And this is the process that we refer to when we say ocean acidification. Now, how do we know that this is happening? Well, here at the Seattle Aquarium, we're working with NOAA, the National Oceanic and Atmospheric Administration, to monitor carbon dioxide in the atmosphere and in the ocean. So in this graph, you can see some of the data from one of NOAA's Seattle monitoring stations, and you can see that the higher spikes correspond to times of day when more cars are on the road burning fossil fuels for transportation. Now, ocean acidification has been well documented over many decades and by hundreds of researchers and has been linked to fossil fuel combustion from human activities. Many marine species that live here in the Pacific Northwest are already being affected by ocean acidification. Studies of the native Olympia oyster, for example, show that survival and growth decrease with exposure to ocean acidification in both laboratory and field settings, and the same appears to be true for many other species, including the pteropod, which is this guy here, a little swimming snail, also for red sea urchins, northern abalone, and turbid snails. So does anybody know what all of these animals have in common? That's right, they all have a hard shell. And you may even have seen other animals, perhaps even touch them gently with your science finger, that have hard shells in our tide pools at the aquarium today. So let's see how this is affecting these animals. If we think of an animal like a snail building a shell, like someone building a brick home, we can see here that each colored piece represents calcium carbonate, the essential molecule or brick that these animals use to construct their homes. Ocean acidification reduces the amount of these building materials that are available to animals in the ocean. So while our snail is stacking those bricks, it's like some of them are being taken away. This makes it harder for the snail to build its shell, and the shell becomes weaker. And that makes it harder for the animal inside to survive. And we are already seeing these effects right here in the Pacific Northwest, as well as in many other places around the world.
Okay, so first of all, so I haven't showed you the whole video, but I would encourage you to, again, type in the chat box if you have questions. And if you have any new ideas that you've just learned from just watching that little clip of the video, I'd encourage you to type a few notes in the chat box, both to give us feedback and to do your own reflection. So what I've got open now, you can open as well. It's at vischange.org. You can see that up here, and I'm just going to go through a little bit. If you go to the home screen of the toolkit, you'll scroll down a little ways, and I'll point out a couple things. One is, here are the 4 visual narratives. Here's ocean acidification. And here's information about the training webinar that I already mentioned, including a registration link. So if you forget how to find more information, come back to vischange.org and scroll down. So we'll go into ocean acidification, and that's where this video is, so you can find it. You can also navigate from coming to this, these 3 bars here, and you'll see that we have the narratives: climate-ocean connection, extreme weather, ocean acidification, and sea level rise. We also have strategic framing resources, so there's background on strategic framing, and there's also some background on the science and an FAQ page. So if we come to coming back to the video for a moment, looking at the background, we can scan ahead. Sorry, I meant to, hold on. Let me go back to the script. That's what I wanted to start with. The annotated script. And so the script is here, and it gives you what to say. So I started with, wait a minute, what do solar panels have to do with the water beneath us? Or what do solar panels have to do with the oceans? And you'll see that there's a notes and rationale. So for each part of the script, we've commented on the communication strategy there. And this slide also talks about scientists having discovered or understanding that burning fossil fuels, and we name them coal, oil, and natural gas, causes a serious problem called ocean acidification. So we've said we know a root cause, we know there's a problem, and given that we know about the problem, as concerned citizens, we have a responsibility. So we're trying to cue that value of being responsible managers, and here we've commented that the talking point cues the value of responsible management. So you'll see as you go through the script that we've tried to highlight how the script connects back to the communication recommendations. Katie also unpacked a little bit about there's value to the systems, all these systems that interconnect us, and there are also side effects of those. And those side effects, as she explained, went through step by step. They were all these transportation systems, whether they're land, air, or water-based, depend on burning fossil fuels. The fossil fuels burning releases the CO2, so it's a step-by-step process. That CO2 goes into the atmosphere. Much of it is absorbed into the ocean. So she said all of those pieces, which helps establish a connection between the root cause, which is where solutions can be found, and an impact on ecosystems, including the animals that need to build shells. So the script outlines these various pieces. She talked about how this image is carbon dioxide is invisible, so we will not see a cloudy thing like this. But if we want to visualize it, this is actually based on scientific data. The CO2 is just colored in a way that makes it show up. So you can go through the script this way as a learning tool for yourself. You can also find the script. Let's go back to the home page here. And if you go to whichever visual narrative you're interested in, so we go to ocean acidification, you can also download the scripts, the narratives and the scripts. So this information is available. You can download it, and you'll see that this download includes background information, communications challenges to consider, frames to advance. So all of this is outlined in more detail. So in this particular case, we're trying to foreground a message that we, humanity, have a shared obligation to find and use ways to manage our natural resources responsibly. Again, you'll see that that responsible word helps cue the idea that this is something we all care about. None of us want to be irresponsible. We want to take care of the world that we depend on and that depends on us. So we walk through particular communications challenges. We sometimes call these traps. For example, many people think issues like this are too big, too scary, too confusing, and too depressing. And these are responses that are fairly common, and if we accidentally cue them, they can work against us trying to help people feel they can be part of the story, part of the solution. So we're trying to avoid some kinds of thinking and advance other kinds of thinking. So I'm not going to read this whole thing, but I will scan down to, we have the script in 3 versions. This is an annotated version, so it shows you the image, it suggests what to say, and it has notes about the rationale. We have the script available in a simplified form, essentially the same script, but we take out the visuals and the explanations. And then we know that your context is not the same as Seattle Aquarium's context. So you may need to shorten it or vary it. So we've got what we call our shortened script. And this is highlighting core elements that we hope you will continue to hold in your presentations. If you're going to speak about ocean acidification, we hope that you'll use this, and then you may build in particular details to suit your setting. Again, as I mentioned earlier, the idea behind this toolkit is both to be a teaching tool so you can learn by going through these materials, but it's also a set of materials you can actually use. So if we go back a step, let's see here. We go back a step, you can also download, if you have an iPad or other flat screen, you can download PowerPoint slides so you can show the visuals that Katie was using. You can grab them and use them on your local device. You can download them in a high-resolution version, and so this is suitable for science on a sphere or other spherical displays. So we tried to make it fairly easy to grab the scripts and grab the images to use in your context. We also, our colleagues at the Buttonwood Park Zoo in New Bedford, Massachusetts, made and tested several activities. So if you are working in a classroom setting with middle school students or perhaps other audiences, these may be of use to you as well. So that is a broad overview. Again, we've got the practice module, we've got downloadable resources. You can navigate the website this way or by going up to the top right and going through materials for whichever of the visual narratives are of interest to you. And again, we do have strategic framing resources that give you background that I did a very brief overview before we started diving into the website. So I want to come back and let's see if I can pull up my presentation. And encourage you to go to vischange.org to learn more. I encourage you to pay attention to your email. I would like to send you a survey in about 6 weeks. I'll ask Laura and Jen to send that out because I'm interested in two things. One, I hope that there's something valuable here for you, and over the holidays you may forget and lose track of it because you're all busy. So I want to prompt you in about 6 weeks. And in addition, I always appreciate having feedback. And if you do use the site and find something valuable or find something unhelpful, I hope you will give me that feedback as well. My email is at the bottom of this screen. You can write it down and send me a note directly if you choose to. And again, I'll remind you that to learn more, one way of doing it is to participate in this training that's happening in January. So I want to stop and take questions.
Right, great, John. Thank you so much. That was, you know, I've seen some of this stuff before, but it's so great to see it again. It's always really good reminder. And we've got some questions coming in. I'll start with an easy, short one first, which is what grade level is the video directed toward? It's a question from Julie.
Oh, it's a great question. I'm so glad you prompted me to address this. When we were testing, and I didn't go through, there's information in the toolkit about how we tested it, and we did test the narratives in several different institutions. We tested them with visiting audiences. So often there were a mix of adults and children in the audience. And so one of the things we did was we had educators memorize a script and simply present. And then we had educators memorize the script, but they made it interactive. And our evaluations from both the educators and audiences suggested everybody got a lot more out of it and felt more comfortable when it was interactive. So the nature of the videos that we produced are a one-way presentation, but in fact these scripts have cues in them to ask questions of your audiences and create a dialogue. And again, these were designed for educators in informal settings. Educators who would use these, we presume, would be reasonably skillful at engaging their audiences and taking cues from their audiences in order to adjust the dialogue so that they can use the script as an overall script, but then at points along the way, such as when Katie asked, who's heard of ocean acidification, she would pause, go off script, have a dialogue at that moment, and then come back to the script after a couple of minutes. And educators reported and our evaluators found from audiences that it's better to have that dynamic of the back and forth with an audience rather than simply a one-way presentation. So to answer your question, I think you can use these scripts to help with many audiences. They were tested with audiences at aquarium and museum settings.
Okay, we've got another question here. This is from Jason, and it says, cognitive science also indicates that people fail to act on climate change because they see it as a distant problem. In this way, it seems to me that a key challenge here is to express urgency without invoking a crisis mentality. I understand that people don't necessarily respond well to crises, but I'm worried being too matter-of-fact in the description doesn't make the problem seem urgent enough. So he'd like to hear your thoughts on that.
So one way of thinking about that is we want to encourage people to practice on an ongoing basis. So if you are feeling alarmed about something, you may trigger a fight or flight kind of response, which tends to be short-lived. We want to get people to participate in group activities, in civic activities, where they can utilize scientific information, they can use information to guide participation with other people who share their concern in order to leverage the information for use at a social scale. Now, I'm not sure if I'm being clear here. We do want to convey a sense of urgency because these issues of how the world is changing matter to all of us, and they will matter for years, decades, and generations to come. So they really are urgent. What we decide to do over the coming months and years will have a very long kind of impact. So, but we don't want to scare people to a point where they despair and feel fatalistic. That would be counterproductive. We really want to get people to think about solutions. So I didn't emphasize the solutions part of the ocean acidification narrative. It's foreshadowed by the story of the solar panels on the roof of the Seattle Aquarium. I think an important element of that I didn't show you is Seattle Aquarium participated in a larger community solar project where many people were investing together to create solar projects in the Seattle region. And by working together, there were people who designed that system that enabled many people to make small investments to create something much more systemic than any one person could do on his or her own. So please help me know if I've addressed your question.
I think you did. And the next question, this is kind of a good follow-on question. This is from Brian, and the question is, can you compare the idea of strategic framing to the initial communication efforts around climate change that led to public confusion around the topic, and in some instances, reports of decreased care and action around the issue?
Let me speak of my own learning over the last, I don't know how long. Going back at least to the Kyoto Accord era, so the 90s, I was very concerned myself about climate change, and I believed at the time that if people simply understood the Keeling curve or the CO2 curve, I'm assuming most of you know what I mean by that, I thought that would get people to act. And we know very well that that's insufficient. It's not an effective way to get people to act. we know that, we keep learning it. Facts don't tend to drive people to action. People tend to be driven to action by a sense that other people are doing good things. It's normal to do these kinds of good things. People tend to be more willing to act if they believe the actions will matter. So we want to use global data and incorporate it with things people are doing already. And one of the things that I keep being gratified by in working to stimulate positive conversation is there are so many groups of people from business, from legislative leadership, from grassroots movements, from faith communities, to school groups. There are so many groups of people who are trying to do good things and create systemic change. So we need to look for those and hold up the idea that people don't have to work by themselves. And in fact, I would eschew or avoid talking about what people can do by themselves and really focus on working collectively, because we are social beings and we need social support to keep plugging away.
Okay, we've got a lot of questions here, so we're going to keep going. How can you address people that don't believe in climate change when you do your presentations?
Just do the presentation. Just most of your audiences are going to be interested, and yes, sometimes you're going to get somebody who is might even heckle you. And I would say let that roll and keep focusing on the people who are interested, because the vast majority of your audiences will be interested, and if they're not interested, they'll at least be polite. So we are not going to change people's minds if they are really in their minds deeply convinced that the world isn't changing in ways that either matter or the world isn't changing in ways that we can do anything about. So I would avoid spending much time worrying about that, and try to engage the vast majority of people who are casually interested and would be really eager to, once they get engaged with you, they'll be really eager to gather more information and understand that they can work with other people to make a difference.
Great, thank you. There's a question about, have you taken these programs, videos into school settings, and if so, in what ways?
Not much. The Buttonwood Park Zoo did a little bit with some teachers and middle schools, but it was not deeply evaluated the way our evaluators did with the aquarium and exploratorium audiences. So I think we need you to try that and tell us, how to make good use of these in school settings.
Great. I have a group of questions here related to the January training, and one question is, are attendees required to be full-time educators?
No, that's a free training, and I actually don't know what the limitations are. I don't know whether we can take 1,000 people, but I expect it's a free training. Anybody can sign up. I do encourage you to sign up for, it's a two-part. You need to do both parts. And of course, we can't enforce that, so do what you can. But no, that's free and open. So just if you're interested, or if you have a colleague that might be interested, please go ahead and sign up. And again, if you don't remember this, or if you didn't copy this URL from the screen, you can go back to vischange.org, scroll down, and the information is there.
And John, just to clarify, those are both virtual trainings?
Yes, those are virtual. Those are a little like this, but much deeper than what we're doing today.
And would they have the same materials that you're presenting today, or would there be new materials? That's another question I've got.
They will. You'll go through more of. I focused on ocean acidification for the example I was using today. They'll go through. I don't know if they'll go through all 4, but they'll certainly go through more of the visual narratives than just ocean acidification. And they'll dive more deeply into the framing theory than I did today.
Great. And we have a question about, do you have program evaluation suggestions or materials to gauge effectiveness?
Oh, that's a great question. We've been working with professional evaluators who have been doing in-person observations and interviews. So they do have tools they've been using. I don't know whether we can distribute those or not, so I would say follow up with me and I can check with our evaluators if there are things we can disseminate.
Great. There's lots of comments about things like powerful narratives can motivate people to action. I think we've gotten most of the, oh, there's one question here. I'm going to throw it out to you, but it may be one you want to pass on to somebody else. It's what acids from the atmosphere contribute to ocean acidification?
What acids? Yep, that's beyond my knowledge. I mean, there's the old acid rain issue, but I don't know to what extent that's really important in the oceans. I know it's important in certain land environments and comes really from sulfur and fuels that are being burned, but that's a different issue. I mean, it's acidification, but it's not exactly the same thing. But I'm not your guy for the details of the chemistry.
Yeah, and we can follow up. That was from John. We can follow up, John, with that question. We can pose it to some of our OA scientists. There's another question about, will the January 11th session be recorded and viewed if you can't attend it in person live?
Oh, great question. You know, I think we probably will. I need to confirm that, but I will certainly recommend that we record both of those and post them back onto bizchange.org. One caveat to that, however, is that they will be interactive. There will be things that the participants will be asked to do during the webinar, and there will also be some work between the two dates. That's partly we broke up a full day training. We kind of broke it up so that we could do it remotely, and so they may not be quite satisfying as recordings. So if you can, I recommend you, if you're interested, I recommend you sign up and block out the time in your schedule. But I will still recommend that we record them.
Great. And then there's some people, there's some reminders here saying that if you refer to the OA Science Summary, there's chemistry details in the toolkit, in the Visualizing Change Toolkit online. And then there's a bunch of other questions here or answers here from scientists about acids, which I'm not going to go into now, but we can get those out to people who are interested.
I just want to say thank you to all those people who are chiming in, because we got to work together as a community to figure this out and how to really help. And I appreciate that there's a lot of expertise among everybody on the call beyond the expertise that I bring. So thank you.
And there's a question here about if I were to develop a curriculum around ocean acidification that incorporates aspects of strategic framing, is there a good place to share that work with a larger group?
Yes, there are lots of good places. I would recommend climateinterpreter.org, which is an online source of information that was developed, and many of you know of climateinterpreter.org. It's intended to be an online virtual community of people who are trying to interpret climate change information. They'd probably be interested, or at least some people there. Also, some of you probably are aware of a group called the Clean Network. They would probably be interested. And then, of course, the source community would be another interested group. So I think there are many, and those are 3 examples. I would suggest that you dig around to see what's already available before you build a whole new curriculum, because there is a lot already. But using strategic framing, I don't know. So just look around before you dive too deep into the work.
Great, yeah, and we're getting suggestions here of the ocean acidification curriculum collection being another place for that. Yeah, and certainly contact us here at Source if you develop materials and would like to share them with a broader audience. So I think we are going to go ahead and wrap that up. Thank you so much, John. I really appreciate your presentation. Super helpful, and I learn something every time I hear from you, and we have had great audience questions and interaction as well. So so thanks so much for your talk.
Can I just say thank you, Laura, thank you, Jennifer, and thanks to all the colleagues that participated in the Visualizing Change project and are continuing to. And again, thanks to all of you for taking time today to join. I hope that this turns out to be useful in practice in the weeks, months, and years to come, and continues to help us all do good work to engage more people in protecting the oceans.
Thank you, John. So thanks everybody for joining us today. Let me get myself in full screen view here. All right, so if we didn't get to your questions today, we can send those to John and get those questions answered and posted on the Source webinar archive in the Google Drive in the next week or so. And you can also contact John directly via email. He provided his email address to you, and we can, I think Jen's provided that in the question box as well. And so we welcome any feedback, suggestions for other topics for this webinar series. You can submit input by replying to the follow-up email you'll receive by or by contacting us for the on the emails listed on the slide here. There's also going to be a short survey that will appear at the end of this session, and we'd greatly appreciate it if you could take a few minutes to complete it, because that feedback will allow us to continue to hosting the Source webinar series, and will also inform NOAA of the impact of the series in terms of who's using it and if the resources are valuable. So we'll share the recording of the webinar via Google Drive and a PDF of the presentation on the Source webinar URL that is listed here. And finally, our next webinar will be in February 2017. We don't have a topic yet, but we're working on finding some presenters and a great topic. So if you have some ideas for us, please let us know. And hope everybody has a wonderful holiday season. And thanks so much for joining us today. And thanks again, John, for a wonderful presentation. This is the end of today's session.